Have you heard of Lao Wei? If you've spent any time on the Chinese internet, you probably have. He's the storyteller from Seattle who went absolutely viral with these incredibly gruesome tales of his job collecting dead bodies. He painted this picture of what he called the American abyss, a society just crumbling from the inside out. And millions, I mean millions of people were hooked. But here's the thing, is any of it actually true? Well, we're about to dig in and find out. See, this guy Lao Wei, who also went by King Squeaky, wasn't just telling ghost stories. No, his anecdotes were raw, visceral, and wrapped up in this sharp social critique of America. People said his delivery was kind of like traditional Chinese crosstalk comedy, which is this back and forth style. So he's telling these dark, grim stories, but in a way that's totally compelling, painting a vision of a collapsing society that just left his audience completely spellbound. So to really get why he was so popular, you've got to understand this Lao subculture. The word Lao literally comes from prison slang for jail. Online, people started using it to describe feeling trapped, like you're serving time in a really tough situation. So by calling himself Lao Wei, or jailed in America, he was perfectly framing life in the US as a kind of prison sentence. And that idea of struggling inside a broken system, man, that really hit home for his audience. So here's the persona he created. He was this brilliant international student from China, living in Seattle, studying to be a doctor. But to make ends meet, he had this gritty part-time job collecting bodies for the King County Medical Examiner's Office. I mean, think about that. You've got the academic elite on one hand, and this dark, street-level reality on the other. It's such a compelling character, maybe a little too perfect, you know? And that right there, that's the million-dollar question. Could an international student, a pre-med no less, actually have a job like this? This is where we pivot. We're going to take off our storyteller hats and put on our fact-checker hats because we are going to break this claim down from every possible angle. All right, first stop in our investigation, the place he supposedly worked. Let's take a look inside the real King County Medical Examiner's Office. And right away, we hit our first major snag. The KCMEO, as it's called, isn't a place where you can just pick up freelance work. Not at all. Being a death investigator is a serious, regulated civil service profession. We're talking about government employees who've gone through background checks and have to follow super strict protocols. There is just no slot for a freelance body collector. It doesn't exist. Okay, now take a look at this. This chart shows the actual jobs at the KCMEO. You've got your full-time medical legal death investigators, you have forensic pathology fellows, who are actual doctors, and you've got part-time interns who are basically doing data entry. Now look closely. What do you not see on that list? Yep, anything even remotely resembling a freelance body collector for students. And let's be clear, a real investigator's job is so much more than just transport. They're at the scene, taking photos, collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, and dealing with grieving families. It's a full-time, 24/7 career that demands a ton of training. It's about as far from a student's side hustle as you can possibly get. And if you need one more piece of evidence, here's the absolute nail in the coffin for the whole freelance idea, the official process. It's all about chain of custody. When someone dies, a licensed funeral home is the one that deals with the paperwork. The medical examiner's office reviews it and then, and only then, issues an authorization number to move the body. An independent operator just can't swoop in. It's legally impossible. Okay, so let's just pretend for a second, let's say that job did exist. There's still another massive, massive hurdle to clear: US immigration law. As an international student, Lao Wei would have been here on an F1 visa. And here's the thing about an F1 visa. Its entire purpose is for you to be a full-time student. That's it. Working is considered a secondary privilege, and because of that, it is heavily, heavily restricted. The government has very strict rules to make sure a student's job doesn't get in the way of their main goal, which is getting that degree. Now, there is a way for students to legally work off campus. It's called Curricular Practical Training, or CPT. But there's a huge catch. The job has to be, and I quote, an integral part of your major. So the university's pre-med department would have to officially state that collecting bodies is an essential part of the curriculum. I mean, can you just imagine that conversation? Yeah, that's never gonna happen. So the line between legal and illegal work for an F1 student is incredibly clear. You can work on campus, maybe 20 hours a week, or you can get special authorization for specific jobs related to your field. Anything else, working for cash, going over your hours, is a huge violation of your visa status. There's really no gray area here. And the consequences, they are no joke. We're talking immediate termination of your student status.
You could even be barred from re-entering the United States for 3 or even 10 years. Now think about it. If you're a student who has invested all this time and money into your education, are you really going to risk all of that and then go online and brag about it? It just doesn't add up. Okay, so finally, let's tackle the core of his whole identity, the idea that he's a pre-med or medical student. Honestly, when you look at what that actually involves, this might be the most unbelievable part of the entire story. Just look at these numbers for a second. Getting into a US medical school is ridiculously competitive for anybody. For international students, the odds are even tougher, with an acceptance rate of only around 14%. So right from the get-go, the Lao A character isn't just a student, he's a huge statistical outlier. And this number? 60 to 80. That's the typical number of hours a medical student spends per week in their clinical rotations. That's not even counting studying. It is an absolutely all-consuming schedule. The idea that a student could handle that kind of workload and then also have a physically and psychologically draining part-time job on the side, it's just not realistic. So let's recap. We've looked at the reality of the medical examiner's office, we've looked at the strict student visa laws, and we've looked at the absolutely insane demands of medical school. So after all that, what's the final verdict? Well, the verdict is pretty clear. The Allow A persona, as masterfully told and as compelling as it is an elaborate work of fiction. The story just doesn't survive contact with reality. It doesn't align with the laws, the institutions, or the academic programs he claims to be a part of. But that leads us to a much more interesting question, doesn't it? If it's not real, why did it get so incredibly popular? Well, the power of this myth was never about the facts. Its power came from its incredible ability to tap into and amplify very real anxieties people have about social decay. It was a story that a lot of people, for their own reasons, wanted to believe was true. And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. The legend of Lao Wei is such a perfect case study for the world we live in now. It forces us to ask ourselves, in an age where we are drowning in information, why is it that sometimes a really compelling story is still more powerful than the truth?